When they sent the letter threatening to tow my boat, I laughed. When they slapped a warning notice on my steering wheel, I started getting angry. But when I discovered the HOA president was secretly selling off our community dock rights to a private marina company, I decided to strike back, with 74 eviction notices placed on the lake they didn't actually own. Hey, where are you watching this video from? Drop a comment below and let me know what state you're in. And while you're at it, tell me what you think about power-hungry HOAs. You won't believe how I made them pay. This is the story of how I turned a fight over a boat slip into the exposure of full-blown corruption, a scandal that ended up on the local news. And yes, Karen cried when the police knocked on her door. After 20 years in the Navy as an engineer, I was ready for some peace and quiet. My wife Linda and I had saved diligently, and when we found a modestly priced home on Silver Springs Lake with dock privileges, we jumped at the opportunity. The previous owner had mentioned the homeowners association was reasonable, mostly just making sure nobody painted their house neon green or parked junkers on the lawn. What really sealed the deal was the community dock. I'd inherited a 24-foot fishing boat from my father shortly before he passed away. It wasn't fancy, just a simple vessel that needed some love. But it represented the reconciliation between my dad and me after years of a strained relationship. I spent months restoring it. Having a guaranteed slip to dock, it was worth the extra $30,000 we paid on the house price. The closing went smoothly, and on a crisp April morning, Linda and I moved in. On the third day, I walked down to check out the community dock where I'd be keeping my boat. As I approached, I noticed an older man in a faded captain's hat inspecting one of the moorings. "You must be the new owner of the Hendricks place," he called out. "I'm Dave Jenkins, but everyone calls me Captain Dave. I manage the dock for the community." Captain Dave gave me a full tour, where the electrical hookups were, which spot was mine. Slip number 17. "It's a good one," he said. "Protected from the wind, but still easy to get in and out of." He also mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that there had been some new blood in the HOA recently. "Could be good," he said, but something in his tone made me pause. That evening, we celebrated with a bottle of champagne on the back deck. Just as we toasted to new beginnings, my phone pinged with an email notification. Subject: Notice of Boat Regulations. Violation: Immediate removal required. I frowned and opened it. "Something's not right," I muttered to Linda. I read every single regulation before we bought this place. The email was from Karen Peterson, president of the Silver Springs HOA. It claimed my boat violated new regulations approved at the most recent HOA meeting. Specifically, that boats over 20 feet in length were no longer permitted, and all vessels must now be of luxury appearance and consistent with community standards. I pulled out our closing documents. There it was, in black and white. Homeowners have the right to dock boats up to 30 feet in length, with no mention of appearance standards, and the document was dated 6 months ago. The next morning, I went straight to the HOA office with copies in hand. Karen greeted me with the fake polite smile of someone trying to hide their irritation. She wore a cream blazer over a silk blouse, her highlighted hair cut in a sharp bob. "The regulations were updated at our meeting last month," she said, oozing rehearsed patience. "All homeowners were notified." I placed the documents on her desk. "I just moved in. I wasn't notified of any meeting. More importantly, these are binding. This slip is mine, and the boat is in compliance." Karen barely looked at them. "The HOA bylaws give the board authority to update regulations, as needed for the good of the community," she said. "Upgrading the dock standards will benefit everyone. We need that slip for members whose vessels meet the new standards." I replied firmly, "I'd like to see the minutes of that meeting, and proof of proper homeowner notification." According to the bylaws, any change to established homeowner rights requires a 75% vote of all homeowners, not just those in attendance. Something flickered in her eyes. She hadn't expected me to read the bylaws. That afternoon, I found Captain Dave down at the dock. He confirmed what I suspected. Karen and the new board members had big plans. They want to turn this dock into some kind of exclusive yacht club, he said. Last week, she told me my services were no longer needed, said they're hiring some professional marina management company. He also revealed that other owners with older boats had received similar violation notices. But that dock, Dave said, it was built with homeowner funds. It was meant to be shared, not turned into some luxury showcase. When I returned home, there was a bright orange notice taped to my mailbox. Violation, vessel subject to towing in 48 hours. I ripped it off. That's when I heard a voice from the yard next door. Looks like you got Karen's welcome gift. It was a woman in her 30s, dark hair tied back, gardening gloves in hand. I'm Sofia Rodriguez, she said, and I think we need to talk. Over iced tea on her patio, she explained everything. Sofia was a real estate attorney who'd lived in Silver Springs for 12 years. Things had changed dramatically when Karen became president, just 4 months ago, after moving from an upscale development in California. She's targeting anything she thinks doesn't fit her vision, Sofia said. She tried to shut down my native plant garden because she said it looked unkempt. Sofia explained how HOA meetings had become increasingly secretive, vague minutes, emergency sessions announced only after they'd occurred. As we talked, an older man with white hair walked up. I saw you with Karen earlier, he said. I'm Frank Thompson. Frank had lived here for nearly 30 years. He helped found the HOA and helped build the dock. I've got every document, he said, including the city agreement that says the dock must remain open to all homeowners. That land isn't even HOA property. It's leased from the city. Then came the breakthrough. The next day, a thick HOA welcome packet arrived in the mail. Tucked inside, unintentionally, was a printed email thread between Karen and a man named Richard Davenport of Davenport Marina Enterprises. They were planning to convert the dock into a premium private marina, restrict access, remove non-conforming vessels, and profit from revenue streams and property value hikes on select homes. I called Sofia immediately. She invited me over, and this time, Frank, Captain Dave, and 2 other owners joined. Sofia examined the email closely. This isn't just overreach, she said. This is self-dealing. If she's benefiting personally, it's a serious violation. Janet, another neighbor who worked at the city records office, offered to investigate any permit filings. Frank would gather original documents. Captain Dave would rally boat owners. I would set up a secure online forum. We were going to fight this together. When Linda came home, I explained everything. I'm proud of you, she said, but I'm worried. HOAs can make life miserable. I looked at the boat, my father's boat, sitting peacefully in the driveway. This wasn't just about a slip. This was about what's right. The next morning, I heard the rumble of a diesel engine. A tow truck from Johnson's Marine Recovery pulled into the cul-de-sac. I grabbed my folder of documents and ran outside. The driver looked up from his clipboard. Got an order to remove an unauthorized vessel. Belongs to Noah Wilson? I'm Noah, I said. Let me see that order. He handed me a form. Karen's signature right at the bottom. It cited emergency enforcement, dated that morning, not even 48 hours after the first notice. Before you touch my property, you need to know a few things, I said calmly. I opened my folder. Not prepared for this level of pushback. Look, man, I just go where they tell me. I don't want to get in the middle of a legal dispute. I understand you're just doing your job, I assured him. But if you remove my property based on an invalid order, you and your company could be liable for damages. As the driver stepped away to make a call, several neighbors came out to watch, including Sofia and Captain Dave. The driver's phone conversation became increasingly animated, with phrases like potential legal issue drifting over. Finally, he approached me again. My boss says we're not touching the boat without clearer authorization. Just then, a sleek black SUV pulled to an abrupt stop behind the tow truck. Karen Peterson emerged, her face flushed with anger. What's the delay? This vessel clearly violates our community standards and needs to be removed immediately. I stood my ground. The driver was just explaining that he can't legally tow my boat from private property without proper authorization. And I was explaining that your removal order violates several HOA procedures and state laws. Karen's eyes narrowed as she took in the small crowd of neighbors. This is HOA business, not a public spectacle. Mr. Wilson, your boat has been deemed non-compliant with our updated regulations, and as president, I have the authority to enforce those regulations. I'd be happy to discuss this privately with you and the full HOA board, I replied, along with my attorney and the documentation proving that these updated regulations were not properly enacted according to your own bylaws. Uncertainty flickered across Karen's face. Sophia stepped forward. As Mr. Wilson's legal representative, I should inform you that proceeding with this removal would constitute a legal seizure of private property and potentially expose the HOA to significant liability. The tow truck driver began backing away. I'm going to need something more than a signature on a form, he said to Karen. My company requires court orders for removing property from private residences when there's a dispute. Karen's composure slipped further. This isn't over, Mr. Wilson, she said, her voice tight with anger. The board will be discussing your continued violations and lack of community spirit at our next meeting. With that, she turned on her heel and stalked back to her SUV. As the tow truck pulled away without my boat, a spontaneous cheer went up from the neighbors. Captain Dave clapped me on the shoulder. Round one to the new guy, he said with a grin. But keep your guard up. Karen doesn't like to lose. The next day, notices appeared in all community mailboxes announcing an emergency HOA meeting that evening, timing deliberately chosen, to prevent many working residents from attending on such short notice. Sophia and Frank immediately began contacting as many neighbors as possible. By late afternoon, we had reached about half of the 127 households in Silver Springs, with 40 residents committing to attend. Linda and I arrived to find Karen and 3 other board members looking surprised and displeased at the turnout.
I recognized Greg Mitchell, the treasurer, sitting beside Karen. As the meeting was called to order, Karen attempted to restrict discussion to the published agenda items only. But Frank immediately cited the HOA bylaw requiring that emergency
meetings allow for open discussion by all members present. Karen reluctantly agreed to a brief informational update before proceeding to the vote. Frank distributed copies of the original dock agreement with the city, highlighting sections specifying that all homeowners were entitled to dock access. As the document circulated, homeowners began asking pointed questions about why long-established rights were being changed. When one resident directly asked about Davenport Marina Enterprises, Karen's face visibly paled. We have been exploring options for professional management of our dock facilities, she said carefully. Davenport's involvement would be strictly in a maintenance and administrative capacity. Sophia held up a printed email. I have communication suggesting that the plan goes far beyond maintenance. In fact, it appears to involve converting our community dock into a premium marina facility that would exclude many current users. Greg Mitchell abruptly stood up. As treasurer, I was told these discussions with Davenport were about improved maintenance at lower costs. If there's a plan to fundamentally change the nature of our dock, the full financial implications haven't been presented to the board. The meeting dissolved into chaos, with residents demanding answers and Karen struggling to maintain control. Eventually, she declared the meeting adjourned without any vote taking place. Over the next week, Karen launched a campaign of petty harassment. Linda and I received violation notices for trivial issues: garbage cans visible too long, garden hose not properly stored, mailbox non-conforming, despite being identical to everyone else's. Each notice threatened fines if not addressed within 48 hours. Other allies received similar treatment. It was clear that Karen was using the HOA's regulatory power to punish those who had opposed her. Meanwhile, Karen rallied her own supporters, spreading rumors that property values would plummet if the community didn't upgrade its image. Some waterfront homeowners began supporting Karen's vision, particularly after private meetings where they were promised priority dock spaces in the new marina. The situation escalated when construction markers appeared at the dock entrance one morning. Captain Dave called me immediately. They're marking out locations for some kind of security gate, and they've got plans showing a complete reconfiguration of the dock layout. I drove down to find a crew from Davenport Development taking measurements. When I asked to see their permits, the foreman showed me a work order signed by Karen authorizing preliminary site preparation for approved dock enhancements. There was no city permit, no environmental impact study, and certainly no approval from the homeowners for such major changes. That evening, our growing group met at Frank's house. Janet from the city records office brought troubling news. Someone with connections to the city council had been trying to expedite approvals for marina development at our dock, bypassing normal procedures by classifying it as a minor modification rather than new development. As the meeting was wrapping up, I shared a thought. What if we fight this where they're weakest? They're acting like they own the lake itself, but they don't. The water is public. It belongs to everyone, and that might give us a way to expose what they're doing in a way that can't be ignored. The next morning, Sophia, Captain Dave, and I met at a small diner outside our community. I laid out my idea. If Karen and Davenport were trying to claim control over lake access that wasn't legally theirs, we would use the lake itself to make our point. The HOA has limited authority over the dock structure, I explained, but they have zero jurisdiction over the actual waters of Silver Springs Lake. That's a state-regulated public waterway. Captain Dave nodded enthusiastically. The lake water is under Department of Natural Resources jurisdiction. The state allows for temporary floating markers or signs for special events, as long as they're properly secured and don't impede navigation, Sophia cautioned. We need to make absolutely sure we stay within the law. No blocking access. Nothing that could be considered a navigation hazard or defamatory. Over the next 3 days, working in my garage with help from Frank and a few trusted neighbors, I constructed 74 floating signs. Each consisted of a small buoyant platform supporting a 2-foot-tall stake with a waterproof sign attached. The message read, "Notice, attempted private seizure of public waters. Silver Springs Lake is public property, not HOA property. The community dock is for all homeowners per legal agreement. Learn more. SaveOurDock.org. Early on a misty Saturday morning, our small flotilla set out, 6 of us in 3 boats, and placed the signs in a strategic pattern across the lake, concentrating them near the community dock, in front of Karen's waterfront home, and along the main boating channels. By 9 a.m., we had finished placing all 74 signs and returned to the dock. Sarah Chen, a reporter for the local newspaper who had been tipped off by Frank, arrived with a photographer. We gave her a full tour by boat, explaining the history of the dock, the current privatization attempt, and the legal issues involved. As the morning progressed, weekend boaters slowed to read our signs and residents began walking down to the lakeshore to see what was happening. By noon, a sizable crowd had gathered at the community dock, sharing stories about their own interactions with Karen's restrictive HOA policies. I was discussing the dock agreement with some neighbors when a commotion drew my attention to the parking lot. Karen had arrived, with Richard Davenport, Greg Mitchell, and 2 uniformed police officers. Karen stormed toward me. "This is vandalism. These people are defacing our community and spreading lies. I want them removed and arrested. Immediately." One of the officers held up a hand. "Ma'am, we need to establish some facts first." He turned to me. "Are you responsible for the signs on the lake?" I nodded. "Yes, officer. Those signs were placed in accordance with all state regulations regarding temporary markers on public waterways. They're properly anchored, don't impede navigation, and contain factually accurate information about public water rights." The officer asked for documentation, which I provided. Karen became increasingly agitated, demanding action and insisting that the HOA had authority over the entire lake area. The officer informed her that a Department of Natural Resources representative was already en route and had primary jurisdiction over the lake. Richard Davenport stepped forward. "Officer, I'm CEO of Davenport Marina Enterprises. We've entered into a development agreement with the Silver Springs HOA to upgrade their existing dock facilities into a modern marina that will benefit the entire community." Sarah Chen stepped forward. "Mr. Davenport, could you clarify if this Agreement includes provisions for restricting access to homeowners who currently have dock rights under the original community agreement. Davenport hedged. Well, any modern facility requires updated usage policies. We're simply ensuring the marina meets contemporary standards and serves the community's evolving needs. A DNR officer arrived and confirmed our signs were legal temporary markers in public waters. The lake itself is state waters, not private property, she explained. As Karen, Davenport, and Greg retreated to Karen's house, I felt a momentary sense of victory. We had successfully drawn public attention to the issue, established the legal boundaries of HOA authority, and bought time for our broader community awareness campaign. Later that evening, Sophia called with exciting news. Janet found something in the archives that changes everything. The original land survey shows that the HOA doesn't just have limited authority over the dock. They don't actually own it at all. It was built and paid for by the city as part of a public recreation grant, with the HOA only given management rights. Karen had been claiming ownership of property that legally belonged to the taxpayer. This wasn't just about my boat anymore. It was about preventing the private appropriation of public resources for the benefit of a few, at the expense of many. And now we had the smoking gun in our hands. Richard Davenport was nowhere to be seen. But rumors later circulated that he'd been quietly arrested at his office earlier that day on charges related to multiple similar marina schemes in other communities. As the meeting broke up, residents gathered in small groups, exchanging stories about their own experiences with Karen's increasingly restrictive HOA rules. Many expressed relief, others promised action, and everyone agreed. The tide was finally turning. The shock over how close the community had come to losing a valuable shared resource was palpable. More than a few neighbors came up to thank me and the other core members of our resistance for bringing the issue to light before it was too late. Linda slipped her arm through mine as we walked home in the gathering twilight. "So," she said with a knowing smile, "is it safe to bring your boat to the dock now?" I laughed and pulled her close. "I think it is, and I think Captain Dave might finally get the appreciation and salary he deserves for managing it all these years." Armed with Janet's discovery about the dock's true ownership, we knew we had found the key to stopping Karen's scheme once and for all. The next morning I called an emergency meeting with our core group. "This changes everything," Sophia said, scanning the documents Janet had uncovered. The dock was built using a state recreational grant 29 years ago. The HOA was granted management rights, but the city retained ownership to ensure it would remain accessible to the public. Frank nodded vigorously. I remember those early discussions. But as original residents moved away, the memory of it all faded. The HOA slowly started acting like it owned the dock outright. Captain Dave spread out the original blueprints Janet had found. According to these, the grant required the dock to remain open to all community residents. No exclusionary policies could be implemented without city approval. And I'm guessing Karen never got that approval, I said. Not even close, Janet added. There's also a clause requiring that any significant change to the dock's use or structure must go through a public comment period and city council vote. Karen had bypassed all of that. We formulated our plan carefully. Rather than confront Karen directly, we'd take our evidence to the proper authorities. Sophia scheduled a meeting with the city attorney. Janet contacted the state agency that had issued the original grant. I began gathering testimonials from longtime residents about the dock's historical use. 2 days later, as I headed to the marina to check on my boat, I noticed an unfamiliar truck parked near the dock entrance. A crew was unloading what looked like electronic gate equipment. I approached casually, phone in hand, and began recording. "Morning," I called to the foreman. "Quite a project you've got here. Mind if I ask what permits you're working under?" The man looked up, puzzled. "We've got authorization from the HOA president, installing access control systems for the new marina conversion." "And your city permits? EPA approval for work on the waterfront?" The foreman hesitated. "Look, buddy, we were told all that was taken care of. I just follow the work orders." "I understand," I said, "but you might want to check that paperwork personally." I just got off the phone with the city engineer's office and they have no record of approved plans for this site. The workers exchanged nervous glances. That's when a black SUV screeched into the lot. Karen jumped out, fury twisting her face. "Stop interfering with official HOA business," she shrieked, marching toward me. These renovations were properly approved by the board. Board approval isn't enough for modifications to city property, I replied calmly, my phone still recording. According to the original grant, this dock belongs to the city, not the HOA. Karen's composure cracked. That's ridiculous. The HOA has maintained this dock for decades. Possession is 9/10 of the law. Actually, came a voice behind us, that's not how municipal property works. We turned to see a woman in a city official's blazer, flanked by a uniformed police officer. I'm Elaine Winters, Deputy City Attorney. We've received some troubling reports about unauthorized development on city property. Karen's face paled. There must be some mistake. The HOA has always had full control over this dock. Elaine shook her head. I have the original grant documents, Miss Peterson. The city retains ownership of this facility. The HOA serves only as the managing entity, subject to strict conditions. Conditions that appear to have been violated. The officer stepped forward. In the meantime, all construction must cease until this matter is resolved through proper permitting. Karen flushed with rage. This is absurd. Do you know how much money we've already committed to this project? Davenport has been paid a substantial deposit. That slip was damning. Greg Mitchell, the HOA treasurer, appeared from his nearby home. What deposit? I never authorized any payment to Davenport. As Karen stammered, I spotted Richard Davenport, himself pulling into the lot. Perfect timing, he approached with a confident swagger. What seems to be the issue here? He asked smoothly. Elaine turned to him. Mr. Davenport, I presume. The city has questions regarding your development of municipal property without proper authorization. Davenport's smile faltered. Our agreement was with the HOA, not the city. If there was a mix-up about jurisdiction, that's not our company's responsibility. Is that why, I asked, stepping forward, you've been secretly meeting with select waterfront homeowners, promising them premium dock spaces if they supported the conversion? Is that why construction began with no environmental impact studies? Sophia added. And, Greg interjected, voice rising, is that why $50,000 was paid to your company without board approval or my authorization as treasurer? A crowd of neighbors was beginning to gather. Davenport's jaw twitched. Any financial arrangements with the HOA have been documented. If internal procedures weren't followed, that's not my concern. Actually, said the officer, it would be your concern if you knowingly participated in financial misappropriation. Karen finally lost it. You people have no idea what it takes to maintain property values. These improvements would benefit everyone. Sometimes leadership means making hard decisions that others won't understand. Leadership also means transparency and following the law, I replied, neither of which happened here. Elaine consulted with the officer, then turned to the construction crew. Pack up your equipment. No further work will proceed until this is sorted out. She faced Karen and Davenport. I'll need both of you in my office this afternoon to discuss potential violations of municipal code, grant conditions, and possibly state laws regarding misuse of funds. As they left, Karen shooting daggers at me, Davenport still pretending nothing was wrong. The neighbors swarmed closer. What's going on? Is the dock safe? Will this cost us? Captain Dave, ever the steady presence, raised his hands. Everyone, please. We're holding an emergency community meeting tonight at the clubhouse. Everything will be explained there, just know this. The dock is still our community dock. That evening, the clubhouse overflowed. Windows were open so the crowd outside could listen in. For the first time in years, nearly every household in Silver Springs was represented. Frank Thompson, the most senior resident, opened the meeting. Friends, we're here to address serious issues about our HOA leadership and the future of our community dock. I laid out everything we had uncovered, the true ownership of the dock, the secret conversion plans, and the illegal construction. Greg Mitchell, visibly shaken, confirmed that over $50,000 had been funneled to Davenport Marina Enterprises, taken from the community's reserve fund without board approval. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. "What happens now?" someone shouted. "Do we lose that money? Will our fees go up?" Sophia stepped forward. "The city attorney has already begun proceedings to recover the funds. Davenport's company will likely face charges, and there's a good chance the money can be returned." "And Karen?" someone called. Greg cleared his throat. "In light of all this, Karen has submitted her resignation as HOA president, effective immediately. As vice president, I'll temporarily assume her duties until we hold a proper election. I want to be clear, I had no knowledge of her unauthorized actions." The room buzzed again, some skeptical, others relieved. Frank raised his hands. "Trust has been broken, but this is our chance to rebuild. I propose forming a special committee to revise our bylaws and put protections in place to prevent this kind of abuse from happening again." The proposal was met with enthusiastic applause. Nominations began immediately. People wanted representation from both longtime residents and newer homeowners. To my surprise, someone nominated me. "I appreciate the trust," I said. "But I'm still fairly new here. There must be others more qualified." "That's exactly why we need you," said Janet. "You stood up when something felt wrong. You didn't just go along with it." By the end of the night, the special committee was formed. 7 residents, including me. Sophia volunteered as legal advisor. The city agreed to work directly with us to establish new rules for managing the dock, protecting access for all homeowners, and ensuring proper maintenance and environmental care. As the crowd lingered, talking in groups on the lawn, the feeling was different now, no longer fear or frustration. It felt like a fresh start. But also something more. A renewed feeling of community ownership and responsibility. Captain Dave found me as I was helping stack chairs. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "in 30 years of living here, I've never seen the neighborhood so united. It took a crisis, but people finally understand that an HOA should be about protecting shared interests, not imposing one person's vision." "I just wanted to keep my boat," I admitted with a rueful smile. "I never intended to spark a community revolution." Dave chuckled. "Sometimes the most important fights are the ones we didn't go looking for." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. The special committee met twice weekly, working through decades of accumulated HOA regulations to identify and correct overreaches and ambiguities. With Sophia's expert guidance, we drafted clearer, more equitable rules that protected homeowners' rights while maintaining necessary community standards. The city formalized a new management agreement for the dock, acknowledging the HOA's role as caretaker, while reinforcing public ownership and access rights. Captain Dave was officially reinstated as dock manager, with a proper contract and budget for maintenance. As for Karen, the legal consequences of her actions unfolded gradually. The unauthorized payment to Davenport resulted in charges of financial misappropriation. The investigation revealed that she had stood to personally benefit from the marina conversion through a hidden consulting arrangement with Davenport's company, a clear violation of her fiduciary duty to the HOA. 6 weeks after our lakeside confrontation, I received a call from Elaine Winters, the deputy city attorney. "I thought you'd want to know, Mr. Wilson. We executed search warrants at Davenport Marina Enterprises this morning. The evidence we found suggests this wasn't their first attempt at this kind of scheme." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Apparently they've approached HOAs in at least 4 other communities with similar conversion proposals. 2 actually went through with it, resulting in homeowners losing access to community amenities they'd paid for through their HOA dues. Your community's resistance may have stopped a much larger operation." The news made the local paper the following day. Sarah Chen's front-page article detailed the broader implications of what had started as a dispute over my boat slip. Local and state officials were now reviewing HOA regulations to provide greater protection against similar abuses of power. The most satisfying moment came the following week when I watched from my kitchen window as police cars pulled up in front of Karen's house. The officers knocked politely but firmly. When Karen answered, her face crumpled as they presented her with what appeared to be a warrant. As predicted, Karen cried, Not from remorse, I suspected, but from the humiliation of being held accountable, perhaps for the first time in her life. That evening, Linda and I sat on our back deck watching the sunset over Silver Springs Lake. My boat was safely docked at Slip 17 where it belonged. You know, Linda said, when we moved here, all you wanted was a quiet retirement. I laughed. So much for peaceful lake living. She squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you. You stood up not just for yourself, but for everyone here. That's the man I married, always fighting the good fight. I nodded toward the community dock, where several neighbors were chatting as they prepared their boats for the evening. It wasn't just me. It was all of us, together. That's what makes a community work, people willing to look out for each other. Still, Linda insisted, it took someone to spark the resistance. Don't underestimate what you started. As dusk fell and lights began to twinkle around the lake, I reflected on the unexpected journey of the past few months. What had begun as a simple defense of my right to dock my father's old fishing boat had evolved into something much more significant. A reclamation of community values and a reminder that shared spaces require shared vigilance. The sound of laughter drifted across the water as a family returned from an evening boat ride. This was what we had fought for, not just access to a dock, but the right to enjoy our community as equals, without artificial barriers or exclusionary policies. The battle against Karen's marina scheme had revealed both the worst and the best of community living. It had exposed the dangers of concentrated power and lack of transparency, but it had also demonstrated the strength that comes from neighbors united in a common cause. In the end, we hadn't just saved a dock, we had rediscovered what made Silver Springs special in the first place, the people who called it home. The summer sun sparkled on Silver Springs Lake as boats of all shapes and sizes gathered for the first annual Community Dock Festival. From sleek power boats to humble fishing vessels like mine, from kayaks and canoes to a few modest sailboats, the diversity of watercraft reflected the restored diversity and inclusiveness of our community. The dock itself had undergone a genuine improvement project, not the commercial conversion Karen had planned, but thoughtful upgrades that enhanced accessibility, safety, and enjoyment for all residents. Captain Dave, now officially employed by the HOA with a proper contract and fair compensation, directed boat traffic with cheerful efficiency, his captain's hat tilted at a jaunty angle. Frank Thompson maneuvered his ancient pontoon boat alongside mine, where I was setting up for the fishing competition that would open the festival. Guess who just sold her house, he said by way of greeting. Karen unloaded her place for 15% below market value. Word is she's moving to a neighborhood with no HOA at all. I chuckled at the irony. Seems she learned something from all this after all. The aftermath of Karen's scheme had been messy but ultimately productive for our community. Karen, Greg, and Richard Davenport had all faced legal consequences for financial improprieties and attempted fraud. The investigation had uncovered not just the unauthorized payment to Davenport's company, but a pattern of selective enforcement of HOA rules against residents who opposed Karen's vision, improper handling of proxy votes, and failure to properly disclose board actions to the community. More importantly, the crisis had galvanized Silver Springs residents to become more engaged in community governance. Meeting attendance was at an all-time high, and a new spirit of transparency and inclusion characterized all HOA activities. The revised bylaws, which Sophia had helped draft, included stronger protections against self-dealing by board members and clearer processes for major decisions affecting common resources. Our fight had even inspired neighboring communities to examine their own HOA practices. Sarah Chen's reporting on the Silver Springs controversy had expanded into an ongoing series about homeowners association governance throughout the county, highlighting both problematic patterns and positive examples of community management. As, for me, I had declined offers to join the new HOA board, preferring to contribute in other ways. The Save Our Dock website had evolved into a broader resource for homeowners dealing with HOA disputes, offering information about relevant laws, strategies for effective community organizing, and a forum for sharing experiences and advice. Linda had embraced the project as well, creating educational materials that explained complex legal and governance concepts in accessible language. The festival was in full swing by midday, with food trucks in the parking lot, games for children on the shore, and a festive atmosphere throughout the community. Standing on the dock, watching families enjoy the lake access that had nearly been taken from them, I felt a deep satisfaction that went beyond winning a fight over my boat slip. We had preserved something valuable, not just for ourselves but for future residents as well. Captain Dave sidled up beside me, offering a cold drink from the cooler. "The Lake Liberator strikes again," he said with a wink, using the nickname that had somehow stuck despite my protests. "Did you see the new sign they put up at the dock entrance?" I hadn't, so he led me over to where a simple but elegant wooden sign now stood. "Silver Springs Community Dock, owned by all. For all." Underneath, in smaller lettering, was a quote: "The strength of a community lies in what we preserve together, not what we possess separately." "That was your line from the Herald interview," Dave said, nodding approvingly. "The committee thought it captured the spirit of what we fought for." As evening approached and boats began to head back to their slips for the night, I took one last turn around the lake in my old fishing boat. The floating eviction notices were long gone, of course, but their impact remained, in the form of a community awakened to both its rights and its responsibilities. Sometimes you have to make waves to keep the water from stagnating, I thought, and sometimes those very waves bring the kind of change that no one believed was possible. A young family was launching a small, well-worn fishing boat, similar to mine in its pre-restoration days. The father waved as I passed. "You're Noah. Wilson, right? We bought a house here partly because of your story. Thanks for keeping this place for people like us." I nodded, feeling a profound sense of satisfaction as I guided my boat back to Slip 17, now officially registered in my name for as long as I remained a Silver Springs resident. I glanced at the shoreline where Karen's now sold house stood. The new owners were on their deck, raising a glass to the sunset and the lake that belonged to everyone. Sometimes you have to stand up not just for yourself but for the community. Some might call me a troublemaker, but I prefer to think of myself as a keeper of the common good. I raised my own drink in a silent toast to a fair and transparent Silver Springs. The water lapped gently against the dock as the sun set on our peaceful lake.